Hello guys, welcome to my second video on web development. My name is Ken. In the previous video, I introduced you to the basics of web development. I also introduced you to HTML. So please, if you don't know HTML, I advise you to go back to our previous video, listen to it, and come back here to get a clear understanding. In this video, you are going to understand the basis of CSS. You are going to learn how to add CSS to your HTML file. We are going to learn about CSS selectors, some CSS properties. We are going to look at some of them. In this video, we are going to set up our coding environment. So if you are not behind your machine or your PC, I advise you to get behind your PC so we can start doing something with our hand. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and this controls how elements are to be displayed in your browser. It includes your layout, your styles, your font, anything that has to do with styling, your colors, where you have positioned any elements in your website. This is done with CSS. CSS has a lot of libraries, and these libraries are pre-written code that was written by someone that you can just easily import into your website and just use their classes. We also have CSS preprocessors, and CSS is not a programming language, but these preprocessors give CSS some programming language features that at the end of the day they transpile everything back to CSS code for you to use. CSS has a syntax, and this is how the syntax looks like. For those of us who don't know what syntax is the set of rules that define how a language is written. So looking at this syntax, CSS has a selector, then they have a declaration. In the declaration, you have a property that you want to change, and you have the value. Now, when you look at this example, for instance, it's going to select an H1 or the H1 in your HTML, give it a color of orange, and align it to the center. Now, there are three ways of adding CSS to your HTML file. We have the inline CSS, we have the internal CSS, and we also have the external CSS. With inline CSS, in the previous video, I introduced you to HTML attributes. So with inline CSS, you provide an attribute of style, then you give it the property, and you give it a value. Because this already is inside the HTML element, you don't need a selector. Now this is not so much recommended, because once you style an H1 tag like this, for you to use it again, you have to write it several times. We also have the internal CSS, and as I said earlier in the previous video, HTML has a head and has a body. So with internal CSS, what you do is that you wrap your styles in a style tag in your head section. So looking at this example, this H1 has selected this H1 in the body of your HTML, and we'll give it a color of green. We have external CSS, and what this does is that your style sheet is in a different file, and you import it in your head section. So in your head, you provide a link to the CSS file, and in this case, it's in the same directory as your HTML file. So in your CSS file, it takes this H1 and P and assigns this style to them. We have 5 categories of CSS selectors. I'm going to brush through it because we are going to get our hands on it. We have 1 simple selectors, and this simple selectors selects based on class or ID. So in this example, we provided an attribute called class, give it a name of center. In your CSS file, you provide a period that tells the browser that you are selecting a class, and you provide a name of the class that you have given, and then you give it the style that you want. In this case, you aligned it to the center, and then you give it a color of red. We have the combinator selectors, and this selects based on specific relationship between your tags. So we can have descendant, we can have child, we can have adjacent siblings and general siblings. I'm not going to explain it in this video, but as we move along, you understand. We have pseudo class selectors, and these pseudo class selectors looking at an example of a button, for instance, when you go to a page, for instance facebook.com, when you look at a button and then you hover over the button, you realize that an event takes place. An example of the event is that the mouse cursor changes to a pointer. Now that is done with a pseudo class selector, and with this pseudo class selectors, it selects and styles based on the state of the element. And in the example I gave, once you hover over a button, the state of that element has changed. We also have the pseudo element selectors, and this selects and styles just the part of that element. So if you have a paragraph, you can decide just to style the first line or the first letter of it. We have the attribute selectors, and this attribute selectors selects based on attributes or the attribute value. So I showed you attributes in the previous video, so if you've not watched it, kindly go back and then I think you will understand this better. So looking at this example, we have an attribute called type of text, and then you are styling it. So any input type of text is going to have this style. So we have some CSS properties. There are hundreds and hundreds of CSS properties, but I just gave some examples so you see how the properties look like. So we have the font properties that tackles anything that have to do with the font. We have the background. When you want to change anything related to the background, you want to give the background an image, a color, you want to fade it, anything that you want to do to the background, we have the properties for that. Okay guys, we have come to an end of the presentation. I want us to go ahead and set up our coding environment. So I want you to go to Google and I want you to type VS Code and press enter. Now go to the first link you see and it will take you to VS Code's website. I want you to go ahead and download the package over here. It's specific to your operating system. I use Linux, so I'm going to say this. If you use Windows or Mac, just download whichever is for your operating system. It's a very simple install. After you have downloaded, just open it, follow the prompt, and you will have Visual Studio Code on your machine. After you are done installing, I want you to open an empty folder. In my case, I'm going to open my documents and I want you to create a folder. I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to name it intro to web dev, and I'll press enter. So after you are done with this, I want you to now open VS Code that you have installed, and I want you to open an empty window. So this is what you are going to see. I want you to go to file, go to open folder, and just navigate to wherever you have created the folder, the empty folder, and just press OK. So once you are done, it's going to open something like this for you. I want you to go to this file you see over here, this new file icon you see over here, tap on it. It will provide you something to type. Then I want you to create a file called index.html and tap the enter key. So after you are done, you see something like this. I want you to collapse this. Now VS Code, the reason why we are using this is because it provides you some shortcuts. It makes your life very easy. It gives you some color coding so you are not confused. It helps you debug your errors. It has so many features that you can use. Let me give you an example. If I want to type an H1 tag, I don't need to do this. I don't need to type H1 and do this. As you can see, just close everything for me. Alternatively, I can just type H1 and just press enter, and it's going to give me this, and I can type whatever I want to type in it. And in this case, I've typed this as a header. Another feature I like so much is when you provide an exclamation mark and press enter, it's going to give you the boilerplate of HTML, and I really like this so much because it simplifies my life and is able to make me work very fast. So I want you to go ahead, just provide the exclamation mark and press enter. Once you see this, I want you to give it a title of Intro to Web Dev, and in your body, I want you to come to your body and provide an H1. Just type H1 and press enter, and just type this is a header, and hooray. And I want you to put your hand on Ctrl S to save. Once you are done with that, I want you to go to the folder you created. In my case, it's in my document, an introduction to web dev, and you open it. You see the index.html you created. I want you to double click it to open it, and you see this over here. So looking at the code I wrote, title introduction to web dev is going to appear at this section. So anything you type in your title tag is going to appear here, and anything in the body is going to show on your page. So guys, in the next video we are going to look much deeper into HTML. I just want you to have this setup down, and in the next video we are going to continue from here. Kindly hit the subscribe button and tell your friends about it, and please leave comments